Trying to attract your employees back to the workplace? We've got what you need right now on the Leadership Voice. Welcome to the Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's show is about creating attractive headquarters that lure employees back. We have two great executives to share their thoughts on how the workspace continues to evolve. Joining us are Rod Gonthaus, the creative director behind Gonthaus Associates, and Joe Lazowski, president and owner of Tangram Interiors. We also have Professor Phoenix von Wagner delivering today's leadership lesson. We have a lot of great things coming, so let's start things off with today's quote of the day. Today's quote comes from renowned designer Cynthia Rowley. If you love your workspace, you'll love your work a little more. Our first guest is Rod Gonthaus. Rod's career spans over 20 plus years and includes extensive experience working for design industry giants and architectural icons such as Wimberley, Allison Tong and Gu, Hirsch and Bedner, and Design One. Rod has also worked on projects in diverse global settings. Rod seamlessly integrates creativity and design with project management and business strategy. Please welcome Rod Gonthaus.
Good to see you, Jay. It's nice to be here.
It's great to have you on the show.
Thank
we can
you.
talk about the changing trends that are taking place in the workplace.
Sure. Yeah, that's a topic that's very timely and unavoidable. If you're in business, this is something that's happening around the water coolers. Do you even say water coolers anymore, or conference rooms? Yeah, absolutely, daily.
So let's talk about your career, and let's talk about what you do.
Right.
When did you realize that you wanted to design and work with companies to design headquarters as a lifelong passion?
You know, I think I realized it, and this is seems kind of a little on a tangent, but I realized it when I was in design school. And I realized it when I was in design school because I understood on a personal level the importance of an environment. Let's use that as a classroom setting, but in a way, it's also sort of like office related, right? The fact that your lighting, the height of your chair, the relationship between your furniture elements together, the slope on the floor, if the floor had a slope, did not have a slope, I realized how important that is to the health and well-being of somebody actually spending all those hours in a production setting, whether it's I'm drawing or I'm working on a computer or what have you, right? And I'll give you a perfect example. And this is sort of speaking to the power of interior design, which I think sometimes does not get its due, okay? Imagine if you're sitting at a desk where the casters on your chair were dragging on your carpet, where the table was a slight inch or half an inch or 3/4 of an inch higher than what it needed to be, to where your wrists were now basically at a weird angle. The lighting above you was not exactly dialed in like we have in the studio here, and it was a little flicker, or the quality of the lighting before LED, was kind of more yellowish, right? And you're spending the whole time basically trying to drag yourself to the chair, to the table, to make sure you're close enough to work on your laptop, on your computer, keyboard, or whatever. All these elements that make for an environment in which people spend, up to 8 hours a day in traditional settings, right? Those are all super critical to the health and well-being of the person working. And if your people that are working, which are your number one asset as far as I'm concerned, okay, if they're not in an environment that's conducive to their health and well-being, then that they suffer. They may not even know that they're suffering because it's just the work environment. I got to do this. But also the companies suffer. Their output suffers. So I knew from very beginning just how powerful this thing was as far as looking out for people's best interest in a work environment.
So it's really a system. It's a systematic process, and it all goes into the proper design of an interior.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about how things kind of shifted, because you've been at this for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
Coming out of COVID,
Mm-hmm.
During COVID, everyone was working from home, or most were working from
Sure.
home. Coming out of COVID, how have your clients' needs evolved?
So what's interesting is I think we had an approach prior to where everything had to fit a certain mold. Call it a corporate culture, call it, the IBM model. We deal with that on the business side. So like these are these models that you emulate, right? And everybody fits in this thing. Well, I happen to be in a creative field. So we actually, I think, were sort of on the forefront in that we understood that it was not a one size fits all, that you needed to account for the industry as a different factor. We saw some of that in the .com, era where everybody became open floor plans, and then the WeWork thing. And so, if you were in a non-traditional work environment, that was starting to happen a little bit, but we were still trying to fit the people into the model. I think what happened with COVID is the paradigm shift happened when it came to employee-employer power dynamics. And the fact that you now found out, because it wasn't just like a two-week thing that we went through, you found out that productivity and deliverables can still be met in a non-traditional work environment. It caused companies that were smart to realize, wait a minute, do I need that 3,000 square foot of real estate, or can I actually get less and lower my capital overhead, right, expenditures? Also, can I better relate to my employees in a manner that was not trying to make them all fit the corporate culture? Because if somebody was a single mom, if somebody was a two work family, to somebody that maybe was at the later part of their careers, earlier in their careers, everybody has their own driving reasons for being in a work environment. And what was happening is we weren't taking the time to really dial in on those individualities. And when the power dynamics changed, the companies were no longer in a position where they could dictate. And as you look at the numbers of unemployment these days, I mean, we have a very low unemployment. You have the stigma of leaving a job or a company is no longer there. Sort of that loyalty dynamics has shifted. So you need to figure out a way as a company to tie in your purpose and your mission to the individuality of the people that are working there, especially if you're trying to retain talent or even attract talent. So all of that happens what? In a physical environment. So how does that physical environment now have to accommodate those needs? And again, it's even more so not a one size fits all anymore.
And so it becomes very customized because
You have to.
we have to know what the vision for the company, the culture they want to set, all of these factor in to design.
Well, and the
decisions.
hopes and aspirations of the employees, right? I mean, like if you've spent 2 years basically working productively and being a productive part of a company, but you've been doing it in a hybrid situation, and you basically have young kids, you've also appreciated the fact that you have kids, you have been able to be around your kids, right? One of the number one expenditures that everybody complained about as being a drain on their salaries was childcare. So now you're seeing companies that are basically trying to attract that talent or retain that talent, actually accommodating childcare in their businesses. Whereas before it was something that, people would drop their kids at the gym and leave them there because it was kind of like the built-in babysitter, because it was cheaper, because it was part of their membership for their gym. So companies now are starting to understand that this is part of the health and well-being of your employee, and it's part of that work-life balance that we talk about, that self-first that we'll talk about. So that's what happens. So you cannot just take out a form and make everybody fit in anymore. It has to be literally custom tailored to your individual employees, or at least groups of them.
So what does it mean then for a company to redesign its headquarters or its workplace
Yeah.
to support organizational priorities? Like, what does that actually mean for a business?
So again, you have people that are in the forefront. And I think, if you have a smaller company versus a large company, larger corporate companies tend to move a little sluggish, like an ocean liner, right? Smaller companies are more nimble and able to basically be agile. Well, part of being competitive, especially in a tight work employment environment, is the attraction and the retention of workers. So your number one asset, other than your reputation or what it is that you're basically involved in, is your physical environment, especially if you're trying to draw people out from their silos in their homes, which they're totally comfortable with. They may even be introverted. I was talking to somebody the other day and saying, we talk about people being introverts, and that's a negative. But people over the course of 2 years of COVID have been able to be introvert but engaged more so than they were physically in a conference room, because they could still put up their hand electronically and participate. Whereas in a setting where you had stronger personalities in the room, they may not feel as comfortable. So part of what it means for a company is, first and foremost, you need people working, whether they're remote, whether they're hybrid, whatever, you need people working. So how do you attract them to your company? I show them an environment that actually is sensitive to their needs. I show them an environment that is also, this is very important too, is not pre-pandemic. It actually shows that I get it. It shows that I basically we are nimble, we are fresh, we're ready to take on the future. It's like if you walked into a building that hasn't been touched, a bank that hasn't been touched in a small, Midwestern town for years and years and years, and you're coming in and you're like a business entrepreneur and you're trying to basically be, like very dynamic about it. And you walk into that environment, you may not feel like that's the right place for your money to be put in. So there's a physical branding that happens. And if you're coming off a pandemic, you have an opportunity to reinvent your company and how it is seen. Which usually takes a lot of time and money under normal circumstances. But here, everybody's kind of looking for, well, what is it that you're doing now? So I think it's very important. And the practical aspect of it is, it's a retention and a attraction and a recruiting of employees, talent, because that talent now is not limited to being at your company. If I don't feel comfortable there, I'm just going to go somewhere else. Somebody else will give me that.
And so companies are reconceptualizing, they're designing,
Sure.
They're making a more attractive workplace to attract people, to
Right.
keep people, make them want to come to work.
Right.
So companies have to be thinking about the employee experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right now, we have 4 generations in the workplace:
It's true.
Boomers, X, Millennials, and Gen Zs.
Mm-hmm.
So as companies are designing their workspaces, should they be catering to certain generations in their designs?
Should you be catering to all generations? Which is where it becomes complex, where it becomes where you need to take the time to actually get to know your employees. You can't make them all basically wear the same shirt with the logo on it. And because they are now wearing the same shirt with the logo on it, they're basically having to accommodate the company culture. If you have 100 employees, you have 100 corporate cultures in their environment. And they have all now basically been empowered because of the fact that either the power dynamic shift, or that they have a personal reference point to being productive in an environment that wasn't what they were told was the only place they could be productive in, right? So you have to accommodate all those generations. And it's a very, very important thing that you ask, because every one of those generations is a different phase of life. Every one of those generations has a experience base that's either deep, if you're like a baby boomer or a Gen Xer. You also have gone through the ranks. Like if you're a Gen Xer, your tutelage was under the hands and the guidance of baby boomers. Okay, you have a different generational take than necessarily having to have that Monday morning meeting every Monday. You have a little bit more difference, and then you got a millennial on the other side that is, again, different, right? And I don't know that we want to delve into it too much to get off topic exactly, but there is also that sort of that knowledge transfer from one generation to the other. Now, if you're a company that is really attuned to your employees, part of a legacy of somebody who's maybe later on in their careers, that is a fulfillment beyond just monetary fulfillment, is, have I been given an opportunity to pass on my knowledge? Have I been given an opportunity to sit in a sort of an elder statesman position and pass on that knowledge and provide mentorship opportunities? So how do you do that? The physical environment has to also be conducive to that. Do you have smaller conference rooms? Do you have like these silos, but they're cross silos? One of the most important things I've read recently is, we talk about coordination, we talk about planning. It's interesting that we never talk about design prior to planning. We always talk about planning. We got to plan and all this stuff, but we never talk about that the impetus of the idea prior to the actual execution through planning is the design. So that's a step that's super critical. And when it comes to people, it's not so much making them coordinate through an environment that you already have. It's more out looking and watching and seeing how the collaboration is organically happening between people. and letting that collaboration be the driving force of how the coordination gets implemented.
So, how does work-life flexibility and self-first kind of trends we're seeing with some of the younger to the workplace generations, how do these things factor into this new corporate culture and office design?
I would say that it's not limited to the younger generation. I think if anybody really is to be honest with themselves, I'm a Gen Xer. We basically bought, we drank the Kool-Aid from the baby boomers. We totally took it all in. This is the path. This is what you put in the years. You get the, up the ranks. You wait 5 years to get to an associate level, blah, blah, blah. Right? And then you realize now that you're later that wasn't necessarily the only way that you could have been available. So we're learning from millennials of what is life balance, right? They have a little bit more appreciation for free time as value-wise versus just only monetary reward. And so, again, life balance, I think, crosses over the generational thing. I think it's more of a universal thing than just literally just to be assigned to the millennials or the Gen Zs. But that being said, it is super important to them. More important to them, I would argue, than maybe Gen Xers or baby boomers that are willing to accommodate. So those things, like we talked about, like childcare in the work environment, right? Having environments within the office space that allow for them to feel like they could be introverted, but not be disconnected, right? Having their autonomy drive how a particular project or assignment basically unfolds, versus we have a way of doing it that is the IBM way, or I keep you referring to that because that's sort of the classic reference, right? But like you that is part of life balance. Being able to have core hours in a business where it's like from 10 to 2 and have the flexibility in when you come in and when you leave. Those are really tiny things that are usually not very high cost impact on a company. It's just a matter of instead of being military regimented, having a little bit of flexibility, a little bit more autonomy. Those things mean a lot to people.
And so having a clear idea of the employees, who the employees are that we have, and the employees that we want to attract, and the employees that we want to build around and keep, these become part of the design decisions.
Absolutely. They should be critical to the design process from the very beginning, because what is your mission? What is your purpose? I have set up a company. I've been in business for a number of years. We're basically now faced with the reality of a new generation of work. We said four, I would argue maybe even 5 generations coming in and out, whatever, right? How do I basically design this to meet my objectives? If you're a company that's basically like, you got Space Beach in Long Beach, right? That's happening. You got all these engineering and aerospace and all of that stuff that's happening right now, right? Boeing is right there in Seal Beach. But is your target employee the person who worked at Boeing? Or is it the person who basically is just coming out of some innovative, trademark process that you just came like fresh out of school? It's almost like when the Apples and Silicon Valley started to happen. It was attracting young talent. And you remember their work environments had to basically accommodate that personality that was being brought in. So I think that's how important it is from the very beginning to be very clear what it is that I'm doing as a company. Who is it that I'm basically going to have in here? You're building a family. What are the family members? Who are the talents the inherent talents that you want in your system? And how do I attract them? You have to house them somewhere. That environment has to be supportive and conducive to all their personalities.
And it's entirely intentional.
Absolutely.
And it has to be.
It cannot be accidental. Accidental means you lose their employees. They go somewhere else.
Great. Well, thank you, Rod, for our interview.
Yeah.
I'm going to have you come back in just a little while. We're going to have a panel discussion with you and Joe together.
Appreciate it.
Terrific.
Thank you.
It's now time for a featured segment of the Leadership Voice. It's today's Did You Know? Today's Did You Know comes from yahoo.com. The well-building standard is the go-to for organizations that want to make changes that advance human health and wellness. Workplace design that considers air quality, lighting, Views onto nature and the general layout of the interior can significantly impact health, satisfaction, well-being, and employee productivity. Now let's get to today's Leadership Countdown. Today's Leadership Countdown comes from steelcase.com. We bring you 5 things people need for hybrid work. Number 5, physical and psychological safety. Number 4, a sense of belonging. Number 3, spaces and technology that encourage productivity. Number 2, physical comfort. And the number 1 thing needed for hybrid work is autonomy over where, when, and how work is done. Don't go anywhere. We have Joe Lazowski in the studio right after this word from the Giles O'Malley Center for Leadership. The Bringing Learning to Work program is our way of connecting the faculty of Cal State Fullerton with the business community of Orange County and Southern California. We have over 72 training programs that are available via distance or face-to-face. And the faculty come to your company and they deliver the training to your employees.
The Bringing Learning to Work program is really fundamentally, it's leadership programming. We do diversity and emotional intelligence training. We partner with Cal State Fullerton because they had subject matter experts in these fields. And we're really fortunate and privileged to be able to do that.
Many companies can't afford training and development personnel. And so this is a great opportunity to leverage Cal State's faculty to help them develop their learning programs.
The leadership of the center and the students allow me to not only bring leadership development to my company, but allow me to interact with some amazing students who have grit, potential, and just amazing futures in front of them, and I get to take part of that. It's a wonderful feeling.
When your organization is ready to develop its talent, reach out to the Center for Leadership and we'll help get you there. Welcome back to the Leadership Voice. Our next guest is Joe Lazowski. As the current CEO and president of Tangram Interiors, Joe successfully acquired a struggling dealership in 2002 and transformed it into one of the largest interior solutions providers in North America. With a natural ability to motivate and encourage entrepreneurship, he has fostered a culture that prioritizes customer satisfaction and employee growth. Outside of Tangram, Joe is extremely passionate about giving back to the community and is a consistent advocate of Orangewood Children's Foundation. Please welcome Joe Lazowski.
Nice to be here, Jay.
Terrific. So let's start by talking a little bit about your journey, because you started in the Midwest,
Right,
with
Michigan.
at UBI. Could you talk about your journey from UBI to Tangram?
So I've been in the industry for like 30 years, so I have a long journey of watching the workplace change over time. And I had my own first business back in Michigan that I started from scratch, be a 2-person office and grew it to about 50 people over 6 years. And I ended up selling it to a professional basketball player, which was a whole unique story in and of itself. But I was recruited by the former CEO of Steelcase and the former CEO of Ford Motor Company, a guy by the name of Jim Hackett. He recruited me to come out and take over Tangram, which was one of the largest contract furniture dealers in the country, but it was in a lot of financial duress. So it was a big decision to move my family and my wife, who was a college professor at the time, to move from the Midwest here to Southern California.
So it was kind of an opportunity to take over a business that really needed some care.
Well, it had lost a significant amount of money 5 years in a row. So when I took it over, it was deeply in debt.
And so you took it over, you grew it. Could you talk about that growth? Because Tangram has really become a terrific example of success in this industry.
Yeah, so we went from one location and about 70 people doing around 60 million in sales to now we are in 6 locations with 400 people and doing $250 million a year in sales.
And any corporate headquarters, any company, any facility are likely your potential clients.
Well, we work in a lot of different segments. We work in the higher education segment, so we've done some work here on campus. We do a lot of work in healthcare and a lot of corporate work as well.
So the work has changed, and like you said, you've been in this industry for a number of years, and you've seen evolution through those years. How did COVID affect workplace dynamics?
Well, COVID changed the workplace permanently. And there were days when I was working from home, I'm like, what does this mean to my industry? That's what I was concerned, because I thought, is this the way we're all going to work forever? Is this we're all going to be working by ourselves in our homes, talking to a screen? And so there's been a permanent change, because there are things that we've done that are better as a result of COVID. And there's a lot of things that we found out over the 3 years we've been going through COVID and the workplace, that things have changed that are not positive in the workplace as a result of COVID.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, because if people are working from home, then the interiors of corporate headquarters are
Empty.
it's less essential.
Right.
And so hybrid workplaces versus full-time in the office kinds of situations maintains the need for organizations to really strategize their interiors.
Well, the one thing that came, before COVID hit, we were packing people in. Everybody was getting closer and closer and smaller in their amount of workplace. And so that really, it made to the point of you had no privacy whatsoever. So the people who wanted to concentrate, they couldn't concentrate because it had gone too far to one extreme where there was no privacy. And one of the things that COVID taught us was that we need privacy. So some people particularly people who are heads down thinkers or who are introverts, they're the people who wanted more privacy. So what we're trying to figure out is what's the right balance. And so as things are coming out of COVID, now the term hybrid workplace is what you hear all the time. It's what's the right balance of collaborative spaces, the use of technology, and enough privacy for everybody to feel comfortable that their workplace is uniquely purposeful for their work and what they're doing and who they are as individuals.
So a lot of companies might have been prioritizing capacity and utilization of space more, and now companies, maybe their priorities are starting to shift a bit.
For sure. Years ago we had too many cubicles with high panels where you couldn't see anybody. So that wasn't working. So we went in the extreme opposite position where it was all open, no panels. Everybody was elbow to elbow and could look each other in the eye while they were working. The only thing blocking their view might have been their monitor. And so now we're moving back towards a collaborative workspace that has the right technology, has the right small meeting places, individual phone booths, if you will, if you need a real private conversation, and collaborative spaces for teams to work.
So when COVID finished, like it ever really finished, but coming out of COVID, there was this return to work phenomena, or this slow return to work, this process, and which has been met with a lot of resistance.
Yeah.
In the workplace. So what must companies do to encourage their employees to want to come back, to get back into the workplace and start being face-to-face with each other and working together?
Well, I like to use the words, make your office a magnet, not a mandate. So the sort of place that you want to go. And what are the reasons you want to go? What is it that you can't get at home that you can get in the office? And some of those things are better technology, better places for people to collaborate, more comfortable ergonomic materials to be working with. But most importantly, it's the people that you're with. And so if you're in a place where you're I worked from home for a year myself. And frankly, it's personal to me, but I was miserable because I like the being around other people. But I understand there's a lot of people who are introverts that are like being at home. So how do we make everybody happy? How do we make a place that people want to go to? And so, working with the design community, that's how we figure out what's the right message, that the right balance of privacy and collaboration and quiet spaces and collaborative loud spaces.
And so we see companies starting to reconceptualize their workplace, reconceptualizing their headquarters, their offices, and thinking more about how do we make it more welcoming, more attractive, more conducive, make people want to come in. What are some of the trends or some of the best practices that you're starting to see?
Well, first of all, I don't think anybody's figured it out perfectly yet.
No.
There's no right answer to this, because if somebody's looking for the magic bullet, we don't have that. But there's a lot of different things that people are trying. First of all, the socialization people have realized is important. So, the simple things of, providing bagels in the morning and getting people to come in or providing lunch for people, those things are helpful. But providing reasons for people to come in. For instance, many organizations started with, I need all the management back in the office. What's the most important thing a young person needs? They need mentorship. They need the ability to talk through issues with them. They want to talk with their boss. If their boss is working from home, how do they get that opportunity? So if the leadership sets the example of being in the office, then they're more likely to get, on a volunteer basis, are more likely to get people, the rest of the staff, to come in. So that's one of the main reasons that I would say. The other thing is, you can't expect people to come back to the same office they were in. Believe it or not, our business is significantly better than I thought it was going to be, because everybody's changing their offices. The CEO has walked in and go, okay, we can't attract people back to the same office. Just by making them come back in is not going to be the right answer for making sure that we're going to get the cooperation and capacity that we're looking for in the organization.
So in a way, there's a mindset here, because for many organizations, there's a great opportunity here to really start thinking about their headquarters and thinking about their office design and start really reimagining the way that they're structuring things.
Well, it used to be that the CEO would never set foot into the real estate planner's office, because it was never the facilities was never part of the strategy of the organization. Real estate and facilities have now become part of the strategy of an organization, because what they've realized is that I need to have a place that people want to come to and get something out of coming to. So, for an interesting phenomenon happened to us over the course of COVID, where the real estate people that we normally dealt with on all of our projects would be like, the CEO is coming to visit with me. What do I say to him or her? So facilities the CEOs have realized that their facilities and real estate is part of the overall corporate strategy of an organization.
And so CEOs need to be much more involved than ever with design issues related to their office, their headquarters, et cetera.
Yes, probably many times we've never realized how important the real estate was, because we took it for granted. But now the CEOs have figured out, I have to have a place that people want to come back to. Now, I can't just make them come back to. Now, you can make them come back, but is that the right strategic decision?
So what are some of the other key benefits that an organization can realize by having a more attractive workplace and encouraging people to be in the same space?
Well, one of the things that was missing most when people were not working together is in a collaborative setting is the transfer of knowledge. Young people today are only going to get better if they learn by being around people that are more senior to them. So they have the natural transfer of knowledge. When you're on a Teams or a Zoom call, you get on the call, you do whatever meeting you're planning to do, you hang up, and there's no other social conversation happening. I was reading an article in, I think it was Yahoo Finance, where the interview was with Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce.com. And they actually measured the product. This was very controversial, but they measured the productivity of the people they hired pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic. And there was a 40% drop-off of productivity that they could measure between the people that they hired in post-pandemic, and which was like a shocking statistic. And he called it swivel chair enablement, which I thought was a brilliant strategy because which is really true. I was sitting in my office yesterday. I sit in an open workstation, and the person sitting next to me needed some help, so I turned my chair, and we had a conversation. That's what's missing when you're strictly working remotely.
Yeah, you can't really have those informal, subtle, even short conversations if it's entirely technology driven. Or you can, but it changes.
It's just unlikely to happen. You know, when you're walking down the hall and you see somebody, I meant to talk to you. Those sort of things don't happen anymore if you're working remotely.
So there's a lot of trends that companies are starting to incorporate. Not having as many dedicated spaces as they might have had prior, more shared spaces. Could you talk about this phenomena? A lot of one of the terms that's being used is hoteling.
Yeah.
That's taking place in the workplace. Could you talk a little bit about that trend that we're starting to see?
Well, a lot of organizations, big organizations, are setting up regional places where their people can come and collaborate. They may have a strategy where they have people working from home 2-3 days a week, but they want them to have a place that they can come in and work together. So there's no longer an assigned, you sit in this office or workstation. You have a more living room setting, or a setting that has more technology in it, more the ability to meet and talk and whiteboard and use all the things that are in an office that you don't need necessarily if you're just doing heads down work at home. So it's and the other thing is work is much more distributed now. It's distributed across cities, it's across countries, it's across internationally. So a lot of our customers are setting up regional centers where people that, they've moved out of the city, but there's a high population of people maybe living in the suburbs. And so they create a place where those people can come in and work. And there's many of those here in Orange County.
Now, this is another thought or another question. With this trend of more and more people working from home, do you anticipate that more companies, more organizations are going to start investing in their employees' home workstations over time?
Well, first of all, that's already happening.
Mm-hmm.
We have large clients who give their clients a shop. You can shop a catalog that they can buy things on the company's dime at the company's pre-priced prices that they'd pay for the furniture. So those things are already happening because what they're concerned about is they want to have people have good productive furniture to sit in and work at, height adjustability, ergonomic chairs. But they also want to be frank, they want to avoid people working at the kitchen table. They want to make sure that people have ergonomic chairs because they don't want lawsuits with people saying, I didn't have a proper workplace to work at home.
It makes sense. I mean, there's a big difference between the level of productivity you can achieve sitting on your sofa and with a laptop on your lap versus having a really good work setting and a good ergonomic setting with better technology. All of these things can really contribute to a better work experience. So what advice would you give a CEO that wants to best utilize their face-to-face talent?
Well, first of all, they need to set the example, by being there themselves, get their leadership to be there, as I've said. But they also need to start talking to the design professionals in the community, talk to HR. What is it? Because if you give people, some people only want to work at home. Some people only want to work in the office. What you have to have is be the voice that says, these are the things and the reasons why. Passing on your knowledge is part of your legacy as a senior employee. As a baby boomer myself, one of the things is that I want to pass on the knowledge that I have because I want to make sure that the people that are coming up have the success opportunities that I had. And you don't want them not getting the opportunity to get that knowledge.
And it seems like that's one of the biggest opportunities or potential threats is that if we don't do these things, then we're going to lose a lot of wisdom. We're going to lose a lot of knowledge. We're going to the companies, all those years of experience and learning and lessons can be for naught.
And I can't say it enough. The people that get hurt the most in this situation are the young people, because they're the ones that are missing out on the opportunity to get the knowledge. And then the more senior people in the organization, they need to be there to pass the information on. That's why the collaboration and the time together matters.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Joe, for being on and talking about these issues with us. We're going to have Rod come back on with us here in just a couple of minutes. We'll have a little bit of a panel discussion.
Great.
Terrific. It's now time for our leadership example. Today's example comes from teambuilding.com. Here are 10 famous company offices known for their innovative workspaces. It's now time for today's leadership lesson, being delivered by Phoenix Von Wagner. Today, Dr. Van Wagner will be talking about how to create a workspace that promotes wellness.
I'm Dr. Phoenix Van Wagner, and here is today's leadership lesson. Today, we're here to discuss a topic of great importance as we navigate the post-pandemic realities of in-office and hybrid work arrangements. That is inclusive universal design. Universal design, by definition, is the design and composition of an environment to be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of their age, size, ability, or disability. The concept of universal design is the foundation of inclusive workspaces that incorporate thoughtful design elements for people of various races, cultural and ethnic heritages, and socioeconomic backgrounds, as well as other less acknowledged characteristics, identities, and experiences. To truly grasp the concept of creating equitable spaces, it is essential to understand what inclusive design entails. Inclusivity goes beyond merely accommodating individuals with disabilities or providing gender-neutral bathrooms and spaces for prayer and meditation. It goes beyond supporting both women and men. Inclusive design, at its core, aims to establish a secure environment where people can efficiently work and where all individuals can be supported, recognized, and celebrated. These carefully crafted spaces enable extroverted and introverted individuals to work in harmony, while embracing neurodiversity to ensure that everyone feels at ease, productive, and successful with an attainable path to career advancement in their industry. To ensure a successful implementation of inclusive universal design, here are 3 tips to keep in mind. Do consider agile spaces. Offer adjustable desks, chairs, and computer monitors to accommodate people of different heights and physical abilities, and create spaces that can be used for multiple purposes by multiple people, depending on the need at hand. Do consider sensory needs. Be mindful of individuals with sensory sensitivities. Provide quiet spaces for or designated areas for focused work, as well as areas where employees can take short breaks to recharge. A one-size-fits-all approach will never work for workspaces, and often the latest and greatest in collaborative workplace design are unsuitable for many employees. Don't underestimate the importance of training. Educate employees about the principles of universal design and the importance of creating an inclusive workspace. Encourage an open dialogue where individuals can voice their needs and provide suggestions for improvement. In conclusion, as we welcome employees back to the office and operate in hybrid work arrangements, let us embrace the power of inclusive universal design so that we may celebrate diversity and enable each individual to thrive. I'm Phoenix Van Wagener, and this has been your leadership lesson.
Thank you, Professor Van Wagner, for that terrific leadership lesson. We've brought back our two guests for today's leadership panel. Rod and Joe, thank you for returning.
Sure.
Our first question is for Rod. We'll answer first. What are the biggest HQ mistakes you have seen, and how did it affect the business? What was learned from it?
For me, I've always had an issue with seeing playground slides incorporated into interiors. Like where these companies, especially with Silicon Valley, they're like Google or whatever, they're trying to draw the younger people, and they put all this gimmickry stuff into the interiors. And it ended up basically backfiring in terms of circulation, in terms of, basically people maybe, getting too creative with how they use them. And that kind of stuff is kind of some of the mistakes that I've seen. I've also seen mistakes in not laying out the space to where it was flexible enough to adjust to the company's culture. We do things where we call them like multifunctional rooms, right? We do them in hospitality more so, but I haven't seen a lot of that until recently, and Joe can speak to this probably more than I, that where these spaces were too stiff, and so they did not adjust. And so when you had shifts and changes in how you basically met your mission, or you had new clients coming in that had different requirements, the spaces were not flexible. And that just translated into more cost, more need to redo them, which was sort of a mistake. It was very short-sighted. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I have seen.
Okay. What about you, Joe? What would be the biggest HQ mistake that you've seen companies make or a company make, and what could we all learn from it?
Well, I'd like to give kind of a post-COVID answer to that. And the post-COVID answer, in my opinion, would be not changing anything, just demanding that people come back to the office. You need to give people a reason why it's better to come back to the office. What's better about the office than your house? And if they come back to something that it was pre-COVID designed, doesn't accommodate for collaboration, doesn't have better technology in it, doesn't have better ergonomics in it, what's the reason I'm doing it? I'm just commuting. So I would like to say that people need to take a critical eye to, am I making a space that's better for them that they didn't have pre-COVID?
All right, so for the second question, we're going to become a little bit more positive, a little bit more optimistic, a little bit more intentional. And Joe, you're going to answer this next question first. Rod, you'll answer it second. What are the best practices you've seen for getting employees to want to return to work?
Well, for one thing, it's not an exact science. Just yesterday, I read in the Wall Street Journal that J.P. Morgan is demanding everybody to come back to the office 5 days a week. Who am I to argue with Jamie Dimon, right? But I will say that I do think it's more, give them a reason to come back to the headquarters. Give them a purpose for coming back, and entice them in certain ways with, whether it's facilities or food or amenities. But most importantly, the ability to collaborate with their coworkers is the best practice that I can see coming. But that message has to come from the CEO. It can't come just from my boss says I got to be in the office 5 days a week.
Rod, what about you? What are you seeing as some of the best practices that companies might try to incorporate to encourage employees back to the workplace?
Well, I think just following up on Joe's comments, I think it is super critical that we don't forget that even in a remote environment, human DNA is wired for connectivity, for social connectivity. So even if we are basically remote working and technology, basically using technology to accomplish that sort of communication, at some point, as much as you do that, you'll have an adverse reaction to wanting to have the other, which is now missing. So to provide an environment that allows for that, and for it to be clear for the CEO, like we were talking about, super important that the top of the company understands this and it's not left to just middle management or HR, right, to basically achieve this. Because it's, again, leadership by example, right? And so if you understand that the environment has to provide that. Also, what came out of COVID is people are looking for safety. And I use that as a general word, but safety in terms of air quality, safety in terms of environments where they can feel like they're like, maybe it's access to the building, where they have more flexibility that way. You mentioned lighting, in one of the other segments, where lighting, air, all these things. They don't have an upgraded version of that at home. So to find an environment where they can connect, and also connect not just for the purpose of being productive, connect for the purpose of being mentored, connect for the purpose of exchange of ideas, connect for the purpose of feeling like they can input on a direction the company is going to take in the achievement of a certain goal. Those things you cannot do at home. So that's the kind of thing. But again, I think it's super important to specify again that the CEO and the upper management needs to be super clear the importance of this so that it really trickles down through the organization.
Yeah, and earlier...
in an authentic way.
And earlier, Joe was mentioning that technology is probably a heck of a lot better in the office than it may be at our homes.
Right.
And companies are making big investments in their headquarters for technology investment and some of those opportunities.
Well, and there's a cost saving to that in a way, because if we remember what happened with the beginning of COVID, there was a lot of people that did not have the internet speed. They did not have the flex space, especially with a lot of homes basically going to an open floor plan. There wasn't a place where you could take a call. There wasn't really Zoom zones. The term never existed before COVID. Now we call them Zoom zones, right? Where you could even isolate for that meeting, or you could work with the kids running around. So an environment that actually has that, okay, from a company's perspective, if you can't provide it in a centralized location, you're going to have to provide it to the everybody who's working remotely. So now the cost outlay, and let's talk about dollars and cents, the cost outlay to achieve that, to provide a consistent background to the office environment at home so that there's a continuity when they're Zooming with other people or clients, rather than I got a cat sitting on my shelf. All of these things from a CEO's, and Joe mentioned it in another segment about the sort of just the safe work environment. If you're at home and the equipment that you are using, the table, the chair, are such that they are not ergonomically supporting of your function for the long hours that you're working, well, who's responsible for that? Is it you or is the company? So there's a legality component. Again, very important for CEOs to be very aware of that.
Now, we've referred to CEOs a couple of times, and our next question, which I'm going to have Rod answer first, really speaks to this notion of the CEO's role in all of this. So, why is it so important for CEOs to be more involved in the aesthetics of the office or the headquarters? Why is it so important?
Well, an office is not just a space. It's a three-dimensional representation of your brand, your DNA. Okay, it is also a defensible measure of your brand and your DNA. So if you're not involved in it at the higher level, what the image that you project to the world through your office environment, is it in consistency with your existing brand, or even reflective of where your aspirational brand is, right? And if it's not, then there's a disconnect, right? There's another thing that also is happening right now, which is basically the cost of commercial real estate and the impact on the economy with the $1.5 trillion of basically debt that's coming online. The value of real estate is much higher. So it cannot just be a box in which people congregate in order to develop an output, a product, a project, whatever. It is your brand. So who are you going to leave that up to decide? It is critical to the leadership to be involved at every step of the way from the design, so that DNA translates in the experience. When we were talking about the experience, the work experience being so critical now, more so than before.
Joe, why is it so important for the CEOs to be firsthand, centrally, strategically involved in the design?
Well, first of all, I want to put an exclamation point on what Rad said. I think I totally agree with the brand recognition. I think it's an extension of who you are as an organization, but it's also part of your strategy. Remember, the people are the business. You might provide a service or make a product, but the people are the ones that make those things happen. And that's the extension of the strategy is the people. So if you don't take care of the people and give them the things that they need to be successful, whether it's a great workplace, great technology, or a safe work environment, then you're not doing your job as a CEO.
So historically, companies would be very customer focused. And now more and more and more organizations need to be more employee focused.
For sure.
It's now time for the final word. This is where you get to share your final pearl of wisdom or share your final piece of advice for our viewers. And we're going to have Joe go first and offer your final word.
I would just encourage all of those who are listening to us today that you make your office place part of your strategy, get your leadership involved, make sure mentorship is part of the discussion of your organization, not just the strategy of how are we going to go to market or how are we going to price a product or how are we going to provide this service that's external. Turn it to be a little more internal in the organization.
Okay. And Rod, what is your final word?
It builds on that. I think we touched on it a number of times. The most important asset that you have is your people. And it's always been the case. I think we lost focus of it, and I think depending on what the industry is, it's easier to do that. If it's production versus like sales, it's different. But I think your people, that's the number one asset. And honestly, the first product that you're producing is the quality of work and life for your employees. Those are your ambassadors, right? And you have to be very critical about the environment in which they are basically being cared for. It's your family. I mean, people spend more time in an office with their coworkers than they do with their family, definitely before COVID, right? Sure. And then they found out that, wait a minute, maybe I want more out of life. So that self-first idea should not be looked at by a company as being something that's against the credo of the company, but rather a strength that the employees can bring to the benefit of the company.
All right. Well, great. I want to thank you both for being on the show today and for joining us. Rod and Joe, it's been great having you on today's episode. We've really shared with our viewers some insights and some ideas around design and aesthetics and essentially making the workplace an attractive magnet for returning to work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for having us.
If you have a question or need advice, connect with us by email, leadership@fullerton.edu, or on Instagram @CSUF_CFL. Thank you for tuning in to today's show, where we explored why and how to improve your company's headquarters experience. Thanks to our featured guests, Rod Gonthaus and Joe Lazowski, as well as Professor Phoenix Van Wagner for delivering today's leadership lesson. Join us each episode of The Leadership Voice, where your leadership development is our purpose. I'm Jay Barbuto here at the Giles O'Malley Center for Leadership at Cal State Fullerton, and we'll see you next time right here on The Leadership Voice.